On this Friday night, Canada's shrinking economy. What's driving the downward trend that caught economists off guard?
The Bank of Canada itself was expecting about flat growth.
And fears that thousands of jobs are being swallowed up by AI. Bill Clinton under oath.
This is a historical day.
What the former U.S. president said about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. New signs that the U.S. is inching toward war with Iran. Why a nuclear deal remains elusive. Plus, Paralympics and politics.
It's really like trying to forget and cancel the 4 years of war fought in Ukraine.
The uproar over allowing Russia and Belarus back into the games.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with good news and bad news for the Canadian economy. First, the bad. This country's economic output shrank in the fourth quarter, marking the slowest pace of annual growth in a decade outside the pandemic. But overall, spending was up, which bodes well for the months ahead. The data comes just as a major U.S. tech firm announced thousands of layoffs, and the company says it plans to replace those workers with artificial intelligence. Heather Yourex-West on whether it's a sign of change to come for the Canadian workforce.
It's the kind of news many Canadians had been bracing for since the U.S. began targeting export sectors with tariffs last year. Still, news that Canada's economy shrank in the last part of 2025 has caught many economists by surprise.
The Bank of Canada itself was expecting about flat growth, economists about 0.2. So this was much larger than both the Bank of Canada and economists were expecting.
Stats Canada says the main reason for the 0.6% contraction was because businesses weren't producing new goods, instead opting to sell off what was left in their inventories. Fewer exports to the U.S. were to blame as well. Canada's job growth also flatlined in 2025 as tariff-wary manufacturers shelved hiring plans. While it's still not known how the rise of artificial intelligence will impact Canadian jobs, news this week that U.S.-based Block, parent company to the online payment platform Square, was laying off 40% of its workforce to capitalize on its use of AI, has sparked concerns that job losses could be seen soon at Canadian tech companies as well.
This idea that he can make this bold move of reducing his actual workforce and directly attribute it to AI is scary.
But this tech watcher says the firm, which is owned by Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey, also has interest in proving AI's value.
Block is making their shifts and their investments in exactly what they're trying to sell, which are efficiencies.
This Calgary-based tech firm, Neo Financial, says while it too has been leveraging AI to increase productivity, it has no plans to cut its workforce.
We're able to get 5 or 10 times the productivity out of people by leveraging generative AI, but we're not using that as a cost-cutting measure.
The economic outlook for 2026 remains soft, though most economists are projecting some growth as Canadian businesses make moves to adapt. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
U.S. President Donald Trump has just directed all federal agencies to stop using artificial intelligence from Anthropic. That tech firm has been feuding with the Trump administration after the company denied the U.S. military unrestricted access to its technology. Anthropic is currently the only AI company operating on classified military systems. The Pentagon had set a deadline of 5:01 p.m. Eastern Time today for the firm to agree to its terms, or the Defense Department threatened to rip up their contract. Anthropic's CEO has said he wants assurances to prevent its Claude model from being used to conduct mass surveillance on Americans or used in autonomous weapons. President Trump has also just suggested the possibility of the U.S. taking control of Cuba.
We could very well end up having a friendly takeover of Cuba.
Trump says Cuba is facing economic collapse over a U.S. energy embargo. Cuba had previously relied on oil from Venezuela until the U.S. removed dictator Nicolas Maduro last month. Earlier this week, the U.S. said it would allow fuel shipments from American companies to private Cuban businesses. That strategy could make Cuba more reliant on America, boosting its private sector while undermining the communist government. And President Trump also had some ominous words today for Iran. Another round of talks between Washington and Tehran ended without a deal over its nuclear program. Trump told reporters he is not happy with how those negotiations are going. The U.S. also told its embassy staff in Israel that if they want to leave, to do so immediately, raising fears that a U.S. strike on Iran is imminent. Jackson Proskow reports from Washington.
The drumbeat of war with Iran keeps growing louder. More U.S. aircraft arrived in the Middle East, along with the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world.
Well, we haven't made a final decision. We're not exactly happy with the way they negotiated. They cannot have nuclear weapons.
Increasingly, it seems U.S. President Donald Trump is intent on striking Iran. The U.S. ordered non-essential staff to leave its embassy in Jerusalem. The UK removed staff from its embassy in Tehran, while Canada joined a growing list of countries urging its citizens to leave Iran immediately while they still can.
I don't think this is a bluff. I wouldn't take anything from the Trump administration as a bluff, and we know that because the administration struck Iran last June.
For now, at least, the two sides are still talking. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Israel Monday to discuss the crisis.
That Iran poses a very grave threat to the United States and has for a very long time.
Iran's nuclear program isn't the only sticking point. Ballistic missiles, which can strike U.S. bases and Israel, are part of the negotiations.
Of course we are prepared. We are fully prepared for both options. War, God forbid, and peace.
Back in Washington, there's deep concern that President Trump is pushing ahead without authorization from Congress.
We are on the precipice of war with serious existential costs without any explanation.
There's little reason to think that war with Iran would be quick or painless. The scale of the U.S. military buildup suggests preparation for a campaign that could last weeks, perhaps months, and span the entire region. Jeff?
Jackson Proskow in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton was testifying for hours behind closed doors today on what he knew about convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Clinton says he had no knowledge of Epstein's crimes, and if he had, he would have turned him in. It's the first time a former president has been compelled to testify before Congress. Mike Armstrong reports on the calls for Trump to follow suit.
Bill Clinton's opening statement was released moments after his motorcade pulled up for his deposition. In it, the former president rejects any suggestion he knew about Epstein's crimes. He writes that their brief acquaintance ended years before any of it became public. Quote, "Though I never witnessed during our limited interactions any indication of what was truly going on, I'm here to offer what little I know so that I might prevent anything like this from ever happening again." The statement ended with two words, making it clear he was prepared: fire away. Well, the Republicans on the Oversight Committee were also ready to go.
Jeffrey Epstein was in the White House 17 times while Bill Clinton was president. We know that Bill Clinton flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane at least 27 times. So those are questions that we're going to ask.
When Hillary Clinton testified before the committee Thursday, she said she had never met Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Clinton could not say the same. Photos show the two men together. The former president says trips he took with Epstein were related to work with his foundation and that their relationship ended more than 20 years ago. Now, most Democrats on the committee supported forcing the former president to testify and now want their Republican colleagues to force the current president to do the same.
President Clinton's presence here today under oath highlights the Donald Trump-sized gaping hole in Chairman Comer's investigation.
Clinton's testimony lasted about 6 hours. Republicans had few complaints afterwards, saying he was cooperative.
He did attempt to respond to every single question asked, even when his attorneys told him to shut up. He kept, going.
Thank you very much.
There are reports some of the questions were specifically about certain photos released by the Department of Justice and included asking whether the former president had sex with the women in the pictures. The committee's chair is promising to release the transcript and video of both testimonies as soon as possible. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Turning now to a plot twist in the high-stakes Hollywood battle over Warner Brothers' Discovery. The entertainment giant, which includes HBO and CNN, has reportedly just signed a $110 billion deal to be acquired by Paramount Skydance. It caps off a months-long hostile campaign by Paramount to entice Warner away from Netflix. That streaming giant had previously announced it was buying Warner for around $87 billion US. But Netflix said last night it did not plan to beat Paramount's latest offer and was walking away. Mark Carney has just arrived in India. The 4-day visit, his first as Prime Minister, is aimed at resetting relations and deepening trade ties. It comes more than 2 years since former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the Indian government of orchestrating the assassination of a BC Sikh leader, along with a series of other violent crimes. But Carney appears eager to turn the page. Our Mackenzie Gray is traveling with the Prime Minister.
The sign of newly blossoming relationship was clear from the moment Mark Carney stepped off the plane. But it's not just the Indian government seemingly ready to move on from past issues. With a senior government official telling reporters on Wednesday they believe agents of the Indian government are no longer continuing with violence, extortions, and murders in Canada, a view this former CSIS agent believes is naive.
So the idea that this is all stopped is wishful thinking. You never know how the future is going to unfold, and that's why it's premature to make statements that there isn't a security threat and that everything's lovely in the garden just to get some trade deals.
The remarks represent a fundamental shift from the Trudeau government, who along with CSIS, the RCMP and former National Security Advisor had all accused agents of the Indian government for being involved with the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and extortions in Canada.
When nobody's feeling safe.
Liberal MP Sukh Dhaliwal represents Surrey, BC, where extortions and violence in this South Asian community are common. He's calling for the conduct and suitability of the senior government official to be reviewed.
Where are the calls coming from? Who are the people that are calling? It is not Canadian. It is people from India that are behind this.
But this issue doesn't seem to be stopping Mark Carney on his quest to find new trade partners. Statements from Carney's office and the RCMP would neither confirm nor deny that the senior official's remarks are not policy of the Government of Canada. Premier of Saskatchewan, who's traveling with Carney, believes both issues can be balanced.
It's important for us to not leave the conversation. It's important for us to be at the table in those countries where we have differences, but also where we have opportunities and points of agreement.
Scott Moe is hopeful Carney will sign a deal to sell Saskatchewan uranium to India.
They need what New Brunswick has.
Similar optimism from New Brunswick's Premier, who's also in Mumbai.
The Port of St. John can get a container from St. John to India in 15 days. So it's not a problem for us to move the goods that we produce.
Carney's not expected to take questions from journalists about his government's change in position until his final day in India on Monday, Jeff, before he heads to both Australia and Japan on his latest round-the-world trip.
Mackenzie Gray in Mumbai. Thanks, Mac. China is halting tariffs on some Canadian agricultural products, in line with the deal Prime Minister Mark Carney struck during his visit to Beijing last month. But some items were notably absent from that list. A statement from China's finance ministry confirmed that Chinese tariffs will be suspended on canola meal, peas, lobster, and crab imports starting March 1st until the end of the year. But tariffs on canola oil and pork remain in place. Carney agreed to allow up to 49,000 Chinese-made electric vehicles into Canada in exchange for the reduction in those tariffs. A declaration of open war coming up. Why tensions just erupted between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistan has just declared open war on neighboring Afghanistan. Warplanes bombed Taliban targets in the Afghan capital, along with other major cities. Afghanistan is accused of harboring militants who've been launching attacks across the border. Vincent McAviney reports.
Pakistani airstrikes on Taliban targets in the Afghan capital, Kabul. After months of escalating violence on their border, Pakistan's defense minister said patience was exhausted. They're accusing the Afghan Taliban government of harboring and offering safe havens to militant groups tied to the Pakistani Taliban, who are intent on imposing Sharia law and destabilizing the government. Afghanistan returned fire on Pakistani border troops, with both sides claiming to have inflicted heavy casualties on the other. We have held talks with the Pakistani side many times, sat together repeatedly and discussed the issues. Unfortunately, Pakistan has so far not been willing to resolve the matter through dialogue and a peaceful approach. Afghans in multiple cities spent Friday assessing the damage. Since the Taliban's return to power in 2021, relations with Pakistan along the 2,600-kilometer border have wavered between cautious diplomacy and open hostility. A ceasefire brokered by Qatar and Turkey in October halted deadly skirmishes. The negotiations since haven't provided a lasting agreement. Pakistanis in Karachi were divided on the escalation. The Afghans were attacking, so it's good that Pakistan retaliated. They were killing Pakistanis, so we've finally taken a stand. It would have been much better if issues were resolved through better means, because both sides are Muslim, and it's Muslims who suffer. Allies of both nations are calling for an end to hostilities and mediation. So far, neither side is showing signs of backing down. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Still ahead, why doctors are now calling for young children to be screened for cholesterol. There's new health guidance for children that could help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease in adulthood. The Canadian Pediatric Society is now recommending cholesterol screening for all kids between the ages of 2 and 10. It says plaque buildup in arteries begins in childhood and is a key driver of heart disease and stroke. Doctors say high cholesterol is easy to diagnose with a blood test and can be treated with medications starting in childhood. More than 90% of cases, which are caused by a genetic condition, go undiagnosed. Well, tomorrow marks the 35th anniversary of the end of the first Gulf War. It began when Iraqi President Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and prompted a coalition of countries, including Canada, to respond with military force. No Canadian troops were killed in the conflict, but many returned home suffering post-traumatic stress and chronic illness. Heidi Petracek explains why some are now feeling forgotten.
The warship HMCS Athabaskan leaving Halifax to patrol the Persian Gulf in August of 1990, one of 3 Canadian ships deployed to the region that would serve a pivotal role in the war against Iraq.
Our hearts go out tonight to those families with loved ones, fathers or mothers, sons and daughters and brothers and sisters on duty in the Persian Gulf.
More than 4,000 Canadians went into the war zone, facing Scud missiles, anti-aircraft fire, and chemical agents.
Our ship sailed in minefields.
Harold Davis was on the Athabaskan for the entire mission.
When we were going through the minefield, we had to put the Zodiac in the water. You got your life in your hands.
I had, 3 years in the military at that point.
Rebecca Patterson is now a senator. Then she was a critical care nurse in the military, stationed at the Forces Field Hospital near the Saudi-Kuwait border.
Every time there was a Scud launched, no matter whatever time, day or night, we'd be, in bed and try and zip ourselves in our gas suits and put on our gas masks to be safe.
Operation Friction lasted 8 months. Once forces returned, those who served found a different battle ahead.
My biggest problem is we came home on the 7th of April, 1991, to fanfare. By the 8th of April, everybody forgot us.
Ottawa only recognized Gulf War illness for veterans' benefits this December. And on paper, a veteran's time in the Gulf is categorized as special duty, not wartime service.
Everybody calls Persian Gulf a war. Well, why don't you want to call me a war veteran?
This is the first year Veterans Affairs has organized ceremonies to honor Gulf War veterans, including events in Halifax.
We need to look back, but we also can't forget, especially in today's really unstable geopolitical environment.
We want to be recognized for the service that we did.
A mission that isn't over, as they now fight to add the conflict to the National War Memorial in Ottawa, 35 years after their Gulf War ended. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Skipping the opening ceremony. Up next, the growing boycott over Russia's inclusion in the Paralympics.
Girl, there's just no living without you.
Some sad news from the music world. American singer-songwriter Neil Sedaka has died. Known for romantic hits like Breaking Up Is Hard to Do and Love Will Keep Us Together. His family says they're devastated by his sudden passing. The cause has not been revealed. Sedaka was 86. Well, there's just 1 week to go now until the Paralympics, and Canada's flag bearers have just been named. They are para-ice hockey captain Tyler McGregor from Forest, Ontario, and para-Nordic skiing star Natalie Wilkie from Salmon Arm, BC. Athletes from 6 countries, including Ukraine, say they're boycotting the opening ceremony because Russia and Belarus are being allowed to compete at the Paralympics. Eric Sorensen reports.
It is such an uplifting send-off, the chance for athletes to demonstrate elite capabilities that overcome the limitations from disabilities. Snowboarder Tyler Turner lost both legs below the knee skydiving.
Show the world what we've got as para-athletes. Really, that's kind of one of the coolest things. We finally get that opportunity for exposure and show the world the level that parasport is at.
50 athletes will compete for Canada at the Paralympics. Two-time gold medalist in curling, Ina Forrest, is 63 and the oldest Canadian athlete.
Keep going. The sky's the limit for how old you can be in Paralympics.
The opening ceremony is in 1 week, but there will be a political cloud over it. Athletes from Russia and Belarus, previously banned because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, will compete under their flags. The Canadian Paralympic Committee is against it, stating, "We stand in solidarity with Ukrainian athletes and the Ukrainian people. We argued and voted against the reinstatement." But other countries are going further and boycotting the opening ceremony. Finland, the latest, joining Latvia, Poland, the Netherlands, and of course Ukraine, officially boycotting the opening. This week, activists chanted Russia, a state terrorist, as they marched in Milan, protesting Russia's inclusion.
It's really like trying to forget and cancel the 4 years of war fought in Ukraine. Thousands and thousands of deaths in Ukraine.
The International Paralympic Committee says reinstatement was decided by a democratic vote by national Paralympic committees.
We don't have a legal way to not have Russia and Belarus, if they want, to attend the opening ceremony. Parade.
But after that, the games will be on. In his first Paralympics, snowboarder Chase Nicklin, who lost a leg in a traffic accident, is chasing a dream.
You're going to the Paralympics, man. This is pretty cool. Soak it all in, really.
Behind every Paralympic athlete, an incredible story. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is near Nordegg, Alberta, where American artist David Popa teamed up with Travel Alberta to paint these stunning murals. The pieces were produced using charcoal, chalk, and lake water in freezing temperatures over several days. Very cool. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Have a great night.